Welcome back. You're still watching SA Today. Now, as South Africa goes to the polls next week on Wednesday, the 8th of May, Amnesty International has urged the authorities to protect journalists so that they can do their work unhindered. The renowned rights body said that journalists must be allowed to do their work free of harassment, intimidation and threats. The statement comes as the World's Press Freedom Day is being marked globally today. And to take this discussion a little further, we're now joined in studio by Mienke Steytler, who's a Media and Digital Content Officer at Amnesty International South Africa. Thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Peter.
All right, so Amnesty International, big on human rights around the world, and I suppose journalists' rights fit into that.
Totally. So for us, it's also about freedom of expression, which really is a cornerstone of a free society. And in South Africa, of course, this year we will be celebrating 25 years since the first free vote where anyone in South Africa could vote. So we like to think of ourselves as a free society, and that includes the protection of journalists to do their work, to provide people with information about human rights issues, but also issues beyond that that shape everyone's lives. And that's why we feel it's so important that the work of journalists is protected.
So what have you been observing that you've made this call?
Yes, we've been observing that there has been some intimidation, harassment, threats, and that some of this actually takes place within an atmosphere of impunity. In some ways, people think that they can just say what they like and attack people. And social media has, of course, brought a new frontier to that. So we really are worried about the lack of accountability, and we're worried that as that lack of accountability grows, we might see really bad shrinking of spaces. So in other words, shrinking of the media's freedom to do its work, and it's such important work.
So on the Reporters Without Borders press index, South Africa's dropped 3 points, but we're actually not bad when we compare ourselves to the rest of the world. We're not bad.
We're not bad. So we acknowledge that that South Africa is still relatively free. I mean, journalists can still move around in safety. If you look at countries like Pakistan or Iran or Saudi Arabia, you see a whole other different story. However, we feel that it shouldn't be taken for granted. In the past few years, it's just been a little bit too often, you know, and we just felt that especially in the run-up to elections and post-elections as well, that we just need to make a call for this accountability and to remind people of how lucky we are to still have a free press.
Do you get a sense of why there's this growing threat? Is it political intolerance? What is it?
It appears to be what people just don't like hearing things that they don't necessarily agree with, and that's really also what freedom of speech is. So sometimes if you don't agree with something, that's your right not to agree with it, but it's also the right of whoever put it out there to put it out there, and that call, you know, that's healthy debate, healthy discourse. But once it starts becoming violent or threats or verges onto hate speech, then of course you have a much bigger problem there. But we think it's also just that people just like to hear what they want to hear, and we're trying to remind people and say, you know what, sometimes you're going to hear things you don't like, but it's actually okay, and that makes you a free citizen, just like it makes a free citizen of everybody else around you.
We've been making comparisons across the continent. Namibia came out tops. Sudan, very close to Somalia, 175 out of 180. So if, as you say, that we make sure we're not complacent, it is the kind of thing that can slide over time.
It can slide over time. We are actually working, or our regional office is working very closely on a case in Mozambique with a journalist there, Amade, who has been in pre-trial detention for 4 months on charges that really, they're not even that clear. He was interviewing people that were fleeing militant groups in the Cabo Delgado area, and he's now been released on the 23rd of April, but he's awaiting trial, and really we feel that these are trumped-up charges as an organization, and it's not only us, there are other journalistic protecting organizations behind him as well, and that's Mozambique, that's next door. Zimbabwe, we're seeing journalists also, and they'll, you know, it'll be charges like, you posted things on social media that were this and this and this, and often they'll say, but I didn't it would be made up profiles. And so that's what we mean with that. As South Africa, we mustn't be complacent. It can slide ever so slowly, and the next thing we know, we're in a dire situation.
So what do we do? How do we manage this? Do we just arrest people? What do we do?
Yes, it is. It is obviously more complicated than it sounds. But what we call for is that when there are really serious harassment or threats made, that these are investigated, and of course in a free and fair way, but that if people are found to be guilty, they must be brought to account. And that's why we also call on the leadership and the leadership elect that we will have by maybe next week this time.
Next week, Friday, probably.
Exactly. And just to come out strongly and say that it will not be accepted to really threaten people, and just to make sure that we don't continue in an atmosphere of impunity, but that there is accountability.
Yeah, and certainly that we also are cognizant of this, not just on a day like today, but 365 days of the year.
Exactly.
All right, Mienke, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. And we'll chat again in the coming days, I have no doubt. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
All right.